Have you ever looked up a potential travel destination on the internet? Then you'll have surely noticed that the images you'll see from those places will all look the same. In this case, for Iceland, Kirkjufjell comes up everywhere. Though it is but one location, the whole country is 100,000 square kilometers, 3 times the size of Belgium. And it's not like the rest of Iceland isn't as dramatically breathtaking. Locations made famous by social media have become literal memes, and because of that, they lose their charm in my eyes. They are copied over and over and over, and it skews our perception of the countries they are in such a way that whole countries become reduced to a singular visual stereotype, and we start consuming places as if they were any kind of product, prepackaged, ready for use. It is so anathema to this very profoundly human idea that is journeying. As travelers, we're drawn to these iconic places, but the experience once there will often be suboptimal. Too many visitors, too much commerce centered around the fact that those places are touristic attractions. And worse, as photographers, we end up redoing what has been done millions of times, somehow hoping that our version will be more successful. This is both shooting our originality in the foot and setting the bar to an almost impossible level. In either scenario, we are driven by the desire to tick a sort of must-do box of a travel checklist. But is it really worth it? Between the ages of 9 and 11, I lived in Southeast Asia. I lived in Singapore for about a year. I lived a little bit in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. As an adult, I look upon those experiences as a sort of vaccine against culture shocks, and has been pivotal in defining how I travel today. As a young adult, I spent about 8 months in Tokyo over the course of a few travels. Living experiences has always been more important to me than seeing places. In other words, I'm not a tourist going through a place's main attractions all within 5 days, but I'm also not a backpacker going through other cultures on a quest for life-changing revelations. Those two types of travelers are two sides of the same coin. I'm just interested in being somewhere new long enough to start understanding it. One of my first self-published books, called Fragmentations, documents the cultural decentration process I went through there, washing away my preconceptions in order to make my surroundings feel almost banal. In the end, I want to be accustomed to places so that they feel more of a second home. I've also been to Iceland for about a month and a half. Because I had Icelandic friends, I spent most of my time in Reykjavik discovering people rather than doing anything nature-related. And although I've rented a car for about 5 days to drive around the country, there are lots of these must-dos that I missed, simply because I didn't know they were there. I regret it a bit, but I definitely don't regret having lived a pretty unique Icelandic experience instead. That whole month spent with locals was worth way more than seeing black sand with my own eyes or photographing it. This is probably also a reason why I feel I can't become a landscape photographer, at least not fully. I might be forever stuck in between documentary and landscape, at least in style or in the way that I go about it. I value the human and cultural elements of places too much to just rush to the nature parts of a country and focus solely on that aspect. I think all of these experiences really inform the specific idea of travel that I have constructed for myself. Taking my time, taking it slow, trying to dismiss the allure of touristic locations and focusing on seeing my surroundings in a more detached way. Freed from this thirst for exoticism. Now that this is covered, let me be a bit more concrete. My in-laws are Norwegian, and so we drive up to Norway every year, sometimes several times a year. Fortunately, the part our family lives in doesn't attract a lot of tourists. Because tourists tend to go towards the west coast. Preikestolen, Trolltunga, Bergen, Lofoten. These are the names that attract tourists in Norway. But just like Iceland, the rest of the country is vast and beautiful. I go on road trips through the country pretty regularly, and whenever I find myself driving towards these famous locations, I start feeling oppressed just by seeing the amount of non-Norwegian plates on the roads. It robs something from me, and it's probably also in part a bit of hubris because my spouse is Norwegian, so I feel like I belong there more, but it's not just that, obviously. Anyway, in those cases, I always end up driving towards the east again, where remote and lonely places are easier to come by and are just as nice to photograph. Whenever I share images from those trips on social media, I avoid being precise about the location. I might tag the fylke, but that's it. I don't want to see a tourist plague in those anonymous locations I've come to know and love, and that I've come to look at with a feeling of habitualness. That's what I really am looking for, turning the foreign into the customary.